The hallway was unusually silent that morning, the kind of silence that made every little sound echo louder than it should. Students walked in groups, laughing, whispering, and sharing jokes before the first bell rang. But in the middle of all the noise stood Maya, quiet, reserved, and always alone. She hugged her books tightly to her chest, her eyes fixed on the ground, praying that she would pass through the day unnoticed. For most of the year, she had managed to remain invisible. But sometimes, invisibility wasn't enough. Sometimes, trouble found you even when you weren't looking for it. That trouble came in the form of Ryan, the boy everyone knew, not because he was kind or talented, but because he carried a shadow of cruelty with him wherever he went. Ryan wasn't just a bully. He was the kind of boy who thrived on breaking others down. He had a crowd of friends who laughed at every insult he threw, who treated his words like entertainment. To them, Ryan was a leader. To Maya, he was her worst nightmare. It started small. A comment here, a mocking laugh there. Ryan would whisper things loud enough for her to hear, about her quietness, her old clothes, her silence in class. Maya ignored it, the way she always had. She thought silence was her shield. But silence didn't stop him. It only fed him. Because bullies don't back down when you ignore them. They push harder until you break. That morning, Maya walked into school, the weight of another long day pressing down on her shoulders. She turned the corner into the hallway, and there he was, leaning against the lockers with his friends. Their laughter stopped the moment they saw her. Maya's stomach sank. She kept her head down, walking faster, praying to just slip by. But Ryan stepped forward, blocking her path. "Well, if it isn't the ghost of this school," he sneered. His friends chuckled behind him. "Do you ever talk? Or are you just too scared your voice will crack?" Maya didn't answer. She shifted her books in her arms and tried to move past him. That was her mistake. Ryan's hand shot out, shoving her shoulder roughly. Her books tumbled to the floor, scattering across the hallway. Gasps rippled from a few onlookers, but nobody stepped forward. That was the thing about Ryan. He made people too afraid to interfere. Maya's cheeks burned as she knelt to pick up her books, her trembling fingers fumbling with the pages. Ryan crouched down beside her, smirking. "Look at you, always so quiet. You think you're better than everyone, hiding behind your silence." His words cut, but Maya said nothing, until he made the mistake of placing his hand on her arm, gripping it hard enough to hurt. Something inside Maya snapped. She wasn't a fighter. She wasn't loud. But she wasn't weak either. For years, she had trained in martial arts after school, not because she wanted to fight anyone, but because her father had always told her, strength is for protection, not for pride. She had carried that lesson in her heart quietly, never needing to use it. Until now. In one swift motion, she twisted her arm out of his grip, her movements faster than anyone could process. Ryan stumbled, caught off guard. Before he could react, Maya stood, her eyes locked on his with a fire no one had ever seen in her before. She didn't scream, she didn't lash out violently. She simply acted with precision. She pushed him back with a controlled force that sent him crashing into the lockers. The sound rang through the hallway like thunder. Gasps turned into shocked silence. Ryan's friends froze. Nobody laughed now. Ryan clutched his shoulder, staring at her in disbelief. The quiet girl he had tormented for months had just turned his arrogance into humiliation in front of everyone. But it wasn't just the physical push that left him shaken. It was her eyes. They weren't filled with fear anymore. They were calm, strong, unbreakable. Maya bent down, picked up the last of her books, and stood tall. Her voice was steady, not loud but powerful enough for everyone around to hear. "Don't ever touch me again," she said, her words cutting through the air like glass. She didn't need to scream. Her strength was in her control. Ryan opened his mouth as if to fire back, but nothing came out. For the first time, he was the one left silent. His friends shifted uncomfortably, realizing that their leader had just been stripped of the power he held over her. And in that moment, something inside Ryan changed. Because humiliation can sting, but respect, earned through strength and courage, has a way of humbling even the cruelest hearts. The rest of the day, Ryan avoided her. Whispers spread quickly through the school about what had happened. Students who had once ignored Maya now looked at her differently. Not with pity, but with admiration. She didn't ask for their attention, but she had earned their respect. For Maya, the fight wasn't about proving she was stronger. It wasn't about revenge or pride. It was about finally standing up, not just to Ryan, but to every shadow that had ever told her she wasn't enough. And that day, she learned something important. Silence doesn't always protect you, but courage does. Ryan never laid a hand on her again. In fact, weeks later, he approached her quietly in the cafeteria. No crowd behind him this time. His voice was low, almost unsure. "I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase the pain. But it was a start. And sometimes, even the worst people can learn when they're faced with strength they don't understand." Maya walked away from that moment not just as the quiet girl anymore, but as someone who had found her voice, without ever needing to shout. And her story became a reminder to everyone who heard it: you don't need to be loud to be strong, and you don't need to hurt others to prove your worth. Sometimes, the quietest people carry the loudest strength. The school bell rang, echoing across the corridors, but Maya walked slowly, deliberately. She had learned long ago that rushing only drew attention. Her teachers often praised her for her neat handwriting and quiet focus, but outside the classroom, those same qualities made her invisible. To most of her classmates, she was simply that girl who never talks. But invisibility wasn't the same as safety. At the end of the hallway, Ryan was surrounded by his friends, throwing a basketball up and catching it like he owned the place. His voice carried above everyone else's, full of confidence and arrogance. People listened, not because they liked him, but because no one wanted to be his next target. Ryan wasn't the biggest guy in school, but he had the kind of cruelty that made him dangerous. He could twist a weakness into a weapon faster than anyone could defend themselves. "Hey, quiet girl," Ryan called as Maya passed. He had noticed her just like she feared. "What's your name again? Or should I just call you Mute?" Maya's pace quickened, but Ryan tossed the basketball toward her feet. It hit the ground and rolled into her legs, forcing her to stop. His friends burst out laughing. Maya bent down, picked up the ball, and held it silently. "Come on," Ryan taunted. "Say something. I bet you sound like a squeaky toy." The laughter echoed. Students nearby pretended not to hear, not to see, because in school silence often meant survival. Maya placed the ball back on the floor and turned to leave. That should have been the end of it. But Ryan wasn't satisfied. He wanted more. He stepped forward, shoved her shoulder, and knocked her books from her arms. Pages scattered like fallen leaves. "Oops," he smirked, "clumsy." Maya's hands shook as she tried to gather her papers. Her heart pounded in her ears. All she wanted was for this to stop. Then Ryan crouched beside her, his grin widening as he whispered cruelly, "You think being quiet makes you special? You're nothing, just a shadow." When his hand gripped her arm, everything inside her changed. It was like a switch flipped. All the years of staying silent, all the long hours of martial arts practice her father had encouraged, all the nights she told herself to be strong, they collided into one moment. Maya twisted her wrist free with a sharp move, her body reacting faster than her thoughts. She rose to her feet, her eyes burning with a calm she had never shown before. Ryan stumbled, caught off guard. The hallway went silent. His friends stopped laughing. Everyone could feel it. The quiet girl wasn't scared anymore. Maya's voice was steady when she finally spoke. "Don't touch me again." Ryan sneered, trying to laugh it off. Or what? But his voice cracked slightly. The next second, Maya pushed him back with a controlled strike from her palm. He staggered, slamming against the lockers with a loud metallic clang. The sound traveled down the hallway, freezing everyone in place. Gasp filled the air. Ryan, the school bully, was on the ground, and Maya, the girl no one noticed, stood tall with her books in her hands. Ryan's face flushed with embarrassment as he scrambled up, but he didn't move toward her. His pride was wounded, but deeper than that, he was shaken by the fact that the girl he thought was weak had strength he couldn't match. His friends shifted uncomfortably, whispering, but none of them dared laugh now. Maya's heart pounded, but she didn't let it show. She held his gaze for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. Her silence wasn't weakness anymore, it was power. The story didn't end there. For days afterward, whispers followed her through the halls. Some students looked at her with awe, others with curiosity. A few even offered her shy smiles, as if they had been waiting for someone to stand up to Ryan all along. And Ryan himself, he changed. He kept his distance, but there was something different in his eyes when they passed each other in the halls. A flicker of respect. One afternoon, weeks later, Ryan approached her in the cafeteria. His friends weren't with him this time. He stood there awkwardly, shifting his weight from one foot to the other before finally speaking. "Hey, I shouldn't have done all that stuff. I was wrong." Maya studied him for a moment. She didn't need to forgive him right away. But she nodded just once before turning back to her food. Ryan walked away, quieter than she had ever seen him. Maya didn't need his apology to heal. She had already healed the moment she chose to stand up for herself. But the apology meant something, not just for her, but for everyone else who had been scared of Ryan. If even the bully could change, maybe things could be different. From that day forward, Maya wasn't invisible anymore. Not because she suddenly became popular or loud, but because people finally saw her for what she truly was: strong, brave, and unshakable.